Okay, so it's 12:08 a.m. August 12th. So I'm not going to be, I guess, okay, this is going to be my second video for the 11th because it's barely past midnight. I'm just now getting to it. Okay, so back to the names things and change your names at marriage and all that. And like kids and what names do the kids get? Okay, so I want to do, if I ever get married, I want to do something a little different. Actually, there's several things I want to do depending on what my last name is and who I marry and what they agree to. Okay, so anyhow, with last names, usually you get your father's last name, and if you have kids, they take your husband's last name or your last name if you're a guy, whatever. And okay, so I've read things online saying, well, if the children don't have the same last name, they won't feel like part of a family unit. And kids have to have the same last name to feel part of the family, and people will be confused if you don't have the same last name. Bullshit. Bull freaking shit, I will tell you right now. Due to divorce and family whatever drama, I am the only person in my family that I have contact with my last name. It doesn't bother me in the least. It just gives me a slight tie to family I don't really see anymore. That's it. You have your father who gave you your last name. You have your mother who has her maiden name. You don't have her maiden name. Are you still part of their family? Yeah, you are. Names have nothing to do with it. And what about your father's mother and all these other names you have in your family tree? You're still part of those families. That one big family. It doesn't matter what your last name is. Even if if you're like a foster kid or adopted, or you have like a stepdad with a different last name and you're more close to his family and you have a different last name, you're still close to that family. The name doesn't really matter. You don't need to have the same name to feel connected. So anyhow, that aside, having the same name doesn't make you part of the same family. It doesn't really work that way anymore. So that being said, so back to the DNA. Okay, so males, let's just say I'm going to use my ancestor as an example, and more other ancestors. So I have an ancestor named Aaron Brown. His father was a Brown, his father was a Brown, his son's a Brown, blah 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 Browns. Now, to be honest, since I'm not a male, I don't have Y DNA, and I have no clue what their Y DNA haplotype is. I just don't know. So I can't really assign a haplotype or haplogroup to this particular Brown family. But I have mitochondrial DNA, and I have taken the 23andMe DNA test, and I do know my mitochondrial DNA. To assign names to the different haplogroups. So H is known as Helena, and so you have way back thousands upon thousands of years ago, like 50,000, I have no idea how far back, you can look it up. You have a woman who Brian Sykes has called Helena. That we have no way of knowing what her name was at all. And so she had children, but we're going to focus on the daughter. She had daughters who had daughters who had daughters. And as time passed, small mutations occurred in the mitochondrial DNA to give us haplogroups H1, H2A, H2B, H7, each little mutation produced a different branch of haplotypes or subclades. There we go. And so because of those mutations, we can trace, like our ancestors back up that line. Now mine is H7A1, okay, and I kind of had this idea that I have. So you have Helena, who's just H. Well, what about these other women who had mutations and whatnot? I'm sure they had names, but like I said, there is no way we know when exactly the mutation occurred, or what woman had that mutation, or what her name was. There's just, I'm sure maybe one day we'll find out one of them, but I don't put much faith in that right now. Happen anytime soon. I have a thread on 23andMe attempting to give names to these other women, and my only rule was you can only have one name each. You can't repeat the same name. I don't think I mentioned anything about spelling, so spelling's whatever. there's two names, same name spelled differently. I guess that counts as different names. But like if your haplogroup is like A12, the name has to start with an A. And mine is H7A1. I chose the name Harriet because I have an ancestor, a direct maternal ancestor named Harriet, so I named it after her. And there's like, I think someone's like U5A1 or U5AB or something. Named theirs Una. So yeah, basically just that. It's kind of like with the guys. Well, your Y DNA is attached to the direct male line, and their surnames come from the father. So the guys already have that. Like even if you don't know what your haplogroup is or haplotype is, you already have the surname thing. Now, granted, you can have an NPE or non-paternal event, and your great-great-granddaddy might not be who your great-great-grandmama said it was. I mean, that happens even now, but whatever. So, with that being said, like, me personally, I don't really have any ties to my father. I mean, I have siblings, I have ties to them in my family, but my last name, not really. And so, I kind of want to change if I ever get married, I kind of want to change my last name to Harriet. I know that sounds kind of silly, to go with my maternal side, and I want to pass that name on down to my kids. Okay, so let's say we did the Harriet thing way on back. I know you cannot change your ancestors' names, but I'm just using their names as an example, because I don't want to give out my full name, and I don't have another name to attach it to, so I'm not married or whatever. Okay, so my ancestor, Aaron Brown. His name's going to be the same regardless. Now, I'm going to tell him his wife, Mary, if I can find what to do with it. We get Mary. This is not her real last name. Okay, so let's say Mary went with the name Harriet. Okay, so Aaron Brown and Mary Harriet got married. And so Mary Harriet here would keep her name. Like, if someone called her Mrs. Brown, that would be fine, but it wouldn't be on the legal documents, and like, so we'd sign our checks with Harriet. And if someone said her like Mr. and Mrs. Brown, no big deal. Mr. and Mrs. Harriet, also no big deal. Okay, that wouldn't be correct, but it wouldn't matter. It's be something for simplicity's sake, because it's easier to write Mr. and Miss Brown than Miss Harriet and Mr. Brown. Like, just whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's say they had children, Calvin and Elizabeth. Elizabeth would be Elizabeth Harriet simply because she inherits her mother's mitochondrial DNA, but not her father's Y DNA. There's no DNA to attach to it to pass that name down, the Brown name down. Now, if she wanted to use Brown as a middle name for her son, or name her son Brown, Harriet, whatever her husband's name is, okay, fine, whatever. It was Harriet. And if they had a son, Calvin, his name would be Calvin Harriet. Like, his last name would be Harriet-Brown or Harriet Brown. So that's what I wanted my kids to say. There'll be something like William, something Harriet, whatever. Now, for some of you, I know are going to be like, oh, you going to give a guy a girl's name? That ain't right. You're going to turn women funny or whatever. Okay, bullshit. You have surnames now that are like James, Stevens, John, Dave. Like, I'm David. I'm starting names of the Bible here. Surnames that are guys' names, guys' first names, or guys' first names with son or an S tacked to the end of it. That doesn't make your daughter or woman less feminine. And the same should apply for guys. You should be able to give a guy a last name like Harriet and not affect him. Plus, you have like James Harriet was your author, but granted it was spelled differently still. So that's what I kind of want to do. I know it's unusual, and I have to see if my state allows up to giving children different last names, but I don't really care what they say, whatever. Plus, I'm not married, so this may or may not ever happen. And for any of you who are asking, well, if you want to do that, why don't you change your name now? Because it's damn inconvenient, and I'm lazy. And plus, I don't really have to explain to my family what I'm doing, because they think I'm weird. But yeah, that's only really hit there. But yeah, because and plus I might do something different. Okay. My other options. Okay. My initials are AMF. If I marry someone with a last name that starts with the letter M, I I am changing my initials to AMFM. Because that's freaking awesome. Like, how do you pass that up? And seriously, you have the same initials as the radio. Okay. Now, if he was also really into this thing I have here, I'd go with that, because the AM/FM thing is a little neat thing. And finally, if I marry someone who is as geeky as me, I'm going to offer that we take my name, but the anagram form of it, because my last name anagrammed is this. This is bad. I don't know if this is badass or super, super geeky, but yeah. This is my last name, and with the letters rearranged. It's Sunforge. How do you pass up Sunforge? That's just, okay, granted, you have to be careful with the kids' names, because you could sound like Star Wars characters, but Sunforge, yeah.